Hello and welcome back, all you ghouls and gals, for a first of my Halloween episodes for this month. And today, Lynch will be painting the not so spooky but equally terrifying Black Templars. So let's grab our paints, swords and pitchforks and torches, and let's dive straight into it. But of course, before we get started, we're going to need a selection of paints, and these are all the ones I've used in this video today, alongside which we will require a nice medium-sized brush, a finer detail brush, and a teeny weeny teeny tiny brush for all of those teeny tiny places. So then, our first step is to prime the model with a black acrylic primer. He does come with a cape, but I'm going to do that separately later on. So, what we're going to need first is going to need some black and some of this inky darkness, so it's a very dark kind of bluish grey. I'm going to mix the two together. I'm going to make a very dark version of this inky darkness. I'm going to slowly build our colours up, so I'm going to thin it down with some water, and then we're going to slowly wet blend the armour. So once the first layer has been achieved, we're then going to add in more of this ink by darkness into our mixture, again keeping our paints nice and thin with water. And you can swap out to a finer detail brush if you like. And then we're just going to go over the same areas, but just working away, gradually getting smaller and smaller as we build up the colours. And then finally, using pretty much pure inky darkness, I'm going to thin our paints down and then use this to highlight. So as you're highlighting, you might be tempted to maybe highlight highlights, if that makes sense. So what we're going to do is that we're going to mix in some of the storm vermin fur, so just any kind of mid-tone grey, in with our storm vermin fur, and then we're just going to, sorry, with our inky darkness, and then we're just going to just pick out just a few corners, just little raised areas, and that adds like a second highlight to the miniature and just helps just for little bits and pieces just to stand out. And then of course you're going to want a very fine detail brush for this, and just take your time and put in as many or as few as you like. Now we're going to be moving on to our trims. So I've got Abaddon Black and some of this lovely Mephiston red. I'm going to mix the two together and make a nice dark red. And then with a nice fine tipped brush, we're just going to go over the trim. So next up, we're just going to add in even more red into our mixture. Again, just keeping it nice and thin with water. And then you can always swap out to a thinner brush if you like. Just use whatever you find most comfortable. And then we're just going to go over the top again, similarly to the main armour, and just picking out the majority of what we've done, and just slowly wet blend our way up to a nice vibrant red. Now using just pure Mephiston red, it's going to be highlighting all the red areas. So also, the same thing with the armour, we can do some spot highlighting. So just grab a little bit of yellow, mix in with your red, and then just pick out just little bits, little details. And again, you can put in as much or as little as you like. So now we're going to tackle all of the sort of the cloth, the fabric, sort of whiter areas, and I've got some of this Corax white base. Now with the base range, they tend to be a much thicker pigment than your regular layer colours like this Flash Kit's yellow. So that means it's going to be much more helpful with going over the black, whereas if you use, let's say, white scar, you're going to end up needing a lot more layers than you would do with this. So again, I'm just going to have our paint just thin down just a tad with some water, and then we're just going to go over and be as careful as we can and try not to, I'm going to jinx myself by saying this, but try not to go in onto the black armour underneath. And then once it's dried, it will look a little bit streaky to start with, but then that is all good, because what we can do is that we can simply apply a thin layer of a second coat. Now then, once the white is dry, we are then going to use this little trick. It's going to use the Skeleton Horde contrast paint. Then with a nice medium brush, we're just going to apply this onto the cloth. And then this is going to kind of act like a wash, but just a little bit better. Now again, you don't want to get this onto the black areas because it will leave a little bit of a kind of browny residue, and we want to avoid that as best as we can. So just as we're waiting it to completely dry, we're going to look at the belts. So I've got some black mixed in a little bit of this Mournfang brown, and I'm gonna have a bit of a 50-50 mix to start out with. Next we're just going to add in some more of this Mournfang brown, and then we're going to start to do a little bit of highlighting before finally using pure Mournfang brown just to give its final highlights. So now that the cloth areas are dry, we're just going to switch back over to them. So we're going to grab some of this Administratum grey, or any kind of generic light grey that you might have, and then some of this white scar. So we'll do a 50-50 mix, a little bit more, and then we are going to edge highlight. And then just as a final highlight, we're just going to use pure white scar. So next up, I'm going to do his pistol, but I'm going to do his pistol yellow. Now you might be asking, why am I using brown? So I'm going to be using it as a base colour to start with. And then I'm going to jump to maybe like a 50-50 mix of the yellow before diving in with just using pure yellow. So now I've mixed in some of our yellow, and then we're just going to start to try and wet blend as best as we can. The reason why I chose brown is because it's in a way a similar colour. So what I would have done otherwise is that I would have painted this yellow and then given it a brown wash, which you can do. You know, you can kind of like skip this part and do that, but I want to see what I can do with doing it this way. Have a little experiment. So I think that yellow on the pistol turned out pretty well. Now, we're going to take a look at all the metal areas. So I'm going to start out with this Iron Warriors base, or just kind of any sort of general sort of dark silver colour that you have, and we're just going to go along with a fine detail brush and just pick out all of the metal areas. So next up with the metal areas, we're going to be using some of this Rune Fang steel, and you can use a small detail brush just to pick out the highlights, which I will do in a minute, but I'm just going to use this nice fluffy brush and I'm just going to highlight just some of the chain areas, just because it's, for me anyway, a little bit easier. Now we're going to be moving on to some gold areas. So I have this brass scorpion here, which is like a nice dark gold. And we're just going to pick out a few areas. And this is entirely up to you guys about what areas you like to be painting gold. But I think maybe these bits on the axe and the kind of lantern on the top there will look really nice. And just while we're on the lantern, I'm just going to attempt at doing a little bit of a glow effect from within. So I'm going to take this white first of all. Just going to thin it down, so it's almost like a wash. And then I'm just going to just ink it in into the centre of the lantern. Then we'll leave it to dry. And then we'll go back and then add a little bit of yellow. So while we're playing around with some light source kind of effects, I'm going to go over to the power axe. I've got some of the white, and then normally on power weapons you have this little node here. So I'm just going to paint that white. Same on the other side. And then we're going to grab a couple of blue paints. So I've got some of this Lothram blue, so it's just a nice mid-tone blue. And we've got a bit of Cantor blue, so it's just a nice dark blue. I'm just going to grab a little bit of each. And we're going to have our paints nice and thinned down with water. I'm going to try and glaze it. So I'm going to start out with kind of the stronger, lighter colours first. So mix in a little bit of white in with this, and then we're just going to create an area just around the outside. And then as we work with the darker blues, and so darken the colours down, we will then extend that area outward. And then hopefully it should give a really lovely effect. So now we're going to move on to his eyes. So we're going to need a nice fine tipped brush. We're going to grab our red and a little bit of our black. Make a nice dark red. And then what we're going to do is that we're just going to cover the first kind of 2/3 or 3/4 of the eye lens. It's going to leave a little bit of the back in complete darkness, because then when we put our little reflective white dot at the end, it will help to stand out much, much more. And then we're just going to build up with a little bit more red as we slowly work our way towards the front of the lenses. So while we've got our yellow, we're just going to grab this, thin it down, and then we're going to inject it into the top of the lantern. So with the eyes, with the eye lenses, you could, if you wanted to, using some of the more sort of mid-tone red, create a bit of a glow around the bottom of it, which you can do. I'm not really going to bother doing, but it's something that you can do if you'd like. So he's pretty much almost ready, but one thing I've noticed on the artworks is that these sort of tassels, really long purity seals, are often painted in a red. So what we can do is that you can either thin down some normal red and then just wash it over the top, but I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to use some of this red contrast paint, and then with a thin brush, it's going to just thin it with a little bit of water. We're just going to run this down the seals. Now, once the purity seals have dried, I'm going to take some of this white, thin it with a little bit of water, and then with a nice fine detail brush, we're going to make some little squiggly lines, some little scriptures, just going down the purity seals. And you can put in as much or as little detail as you like. And so he is now complete. So with the cape, I did a very similar method to how I did with the majority of this miniature. So I just wet blended the red at the back there, and then the same with the cream underneath. And I did the same thing as I did with cream, as I did with the tabard on the front. And then, yeah, it all just kind of came together really nicely. So let's pop him onto the turntable and let's do our outro. And so here we are at the end of the video. So this is how I went about painting a Black Templar Sword Brethren for your Black Templar armies. It's been really, really fun to paint this miniature, and this is a commission for a gift for a friend of mine that's starting a Black Templar armies. So yeah, really hope that you're gonna enjoy this when it arrives to you. So if you had enjoyed this video, then do show your appreciation with a like. If you're new, a subscribe, and comment down below. Do you collect Black Templars? Do you think I've done a very sort of faithful and sort of worthwhile job? I do hope I have. Just looking at all the reference art and bits and pieces, and I think I've got it pretty down accurate. I quite like giving the bolt pistol a nice splash of yellow, just really helps to make it stand out a little bit further. And if you wanted to pick up any of these awesome miniatures for yourselves, then do check out my affiliate link to Wayland Games. That will be pinned in the description down below. You can save yourself 10 to 20% off, and a little bit goes towards me to help sort of fund and support the channel. So if you want to support me that way, that's a great way to do it. There's also going to be some stills and reels of this miniature over at my Instagram page, Lynch Paints. If you want to follow me out over there as well, that would be fantastic. And I do have a coffee page as well. I haven't really kind of been on it for a little while, but if you want to show a little bit more support and appreciation, then you can sort of give a little thanks that way, or hit the super thanks button down below. That would be equally as amazing. So without further ado, thank you ever so much everyone for tuning in. Stay safe, stay spooky, and we'll see you all next time.